little guys. These little guys have been spotted sneaking through homes in Bartlesville, Oklahoma. Using the cover of night, little guys are known to break into residences with the sole intent of rearranging the belongings of the occupants. Upon completion of their midnight mission, little guys retreat into walls, floorboards, and ventilation systems to rest and wait for residents to wake. It is thought that little guys gain sustenance from the confusion of humans. As occupants become increasingly baffled by the misplacement of their property, little guys become energized and prepare to target another household. Once fully rested, they promptly relocate and the mischievous cycle is continued. Little guys are notoriously difficult to spot and even harder to capture untrained. Seen here stopped in their tracks, little guys will almost always freeze if they sense detection. This behavior is thought to be a poorly developed defense mechanism. This has been a public service announcement from the Ministry of Latent Places.
Great. In that case, you're saying great now too?
No?
Oh, now you're quiet. Oh, first you talk, then you don't talk. It's like a conversation or something. Hi, welcome to another episode of Lucky Paper Radio. My name is Andy. Let me get this window over here so I can see the waveforms, make sure our levels are good. And I'm here as always with my co-host, Anthony, a brave little field mouse of a man, Maddox.
That's what they always call me.
That's gotta be your... Somebody out there should make a supercut of all the times that your response to your nickname has been like, that's me.
Or don't. That's fine.
You could yes and me.
Yes and.
You could be like, cheap, cheap, cheap. I want to get a little cheese. Or whatever field mice like. I don't know.
Not cheese. That's city mice, obviously. Okay. Don't you know the whole...
I'm going to go gather some straw and make a little
seeds.
hole.
I love seeds so much.
I know you like squirrels a lot, but I feel like you're not a squirrel.
I'm so glad you noticed. I've actually been a human this entire time.
Come on, play in the space with me.
Okay.
If you had a fursona, if you were one of the animals of Bloomburrow, I feel like you're not a squirrel. I feel like squirrels are very like energetic and hyperactive, and you are calm, even-keeled.
A mourning dove. Just sort of putter around and go whoop, 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 whoop whenever I get scared by something.
There's a lot of birds. Are there doves in here?
Good question.
Yeah, you could be a bird. I could see that. Definitely not a lizard. Definitely not a bat. I don't think you're
not a lizard.
Weasel.
What are you? You're a raccoon, probably, because you love trash.
I've been told by a lot of people I'm an otter, so...
I don't think that makes sense.
Yeah, well, if you know, you know.
I don't know.
So, we're talking about Bloomburrow on this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. This is Magic's latest expansion, and it's all about little guys.
Just little guys.
Little guys.
You like little guys. I
do like little guys. I love squirrels. To be clear.
Put aside mechanics, put aside, apathy with new releases and just being overwhelmed by all the latest product. Flavor-wise, do you like this plain?
I've honestly not been able to answer that question for myself because I do like little guys, but I also just like actual animals, and anthropomorphic animals are not as much my vibe, but some of them are cute.
This is like your Pokemon take, but makes so much less sense. Like, your Pokemon take makes a lot of sense. You're
right.
Like, if every Pokemon is just an animal that you just are pretending doesn't exist and you drew slightly different, and you're calling it, like, this thing now. That seems fair. I mean, but they're little guys. I don't know. Like, do you have no imagination, no whimsy, no ability to imagine?
I'm full of whimsy. I'm
to
just
imagine a little world for the little guys where they're, where they have little societies and do these fun things.
Sure, I do like the bit of world building of like, oh, it's the 3-tree thing, talking about it like it's a metropolis, and it's like, oh yeah, they're big, huge space that takes up 3 trees.
I'm really into the flavor of this set. I actually didn't grow up reading Redwall or any other...
Rats of Nim?
Yeah, or any other little critter fantasy. So it's not like I have nostalgia or, affection for it from my childhood. This just feels like a really nice extension of the Magic fantasy world, where some of the sets to me feel like a stretch, or like they've just kind of taken a shallow trope, a shallow skin, and like laid it over something. This feels
Put a hat on it?
Yeah. This feels more fleshed out and more deep and more like Magic to me. I'm really into the flavor of this set. I think it's very cool.
I do agree with that. And I wonder if maybe because it's sort of like a cutesy kind of context overall, they handled it, I think, a little bit more delicately. And, unlike Outlaws of Thunder Junction, which, like, looking through these cards just make me think about how much I really dislike that set, because there isn't holy cow here.
Dude, you
like, think it's actually they actually made some nice jokes. It's
looking at cards I like makes me think about all the cards I hate.
Man, that set was so off-putting. I'm just like, oh yeah, they actually can make some nice
simply
cards.
Don't
now.
think about it then. Just let it wash
over
you.
I tried.
Let the water roll off of you like beads of water off a duck's back, Anthony. I like the flavor of this set. I think it's very cool. We'll talk about the mechanics in this episode. We're also going to talk about the cards we're interested in for our own cubes in this episode, because this is the first of our now 2-part cube set review for Bloomburrow. And that means, of course, that our community survey is currently up to inform our conversation in part 2 of our cube set review. So if you have a cube out there, or multiple cubes, go to luckypaper.co/survey/BLB. It'll link directly to the Bloomburrow Commander survey as well when you finish that. And just tell us what cards you're interested in playing in your own cubes from this set. It's a nice way to look at the cards in the new set. I always use our actual survey page to, review the entire spoiler for a new set anyway. In the future, you can look back on it and see how right you were about what you thought you would like about a set. But that'll be part 2. This part 1 is just us talking about the mechanics from a design perspective and our own cubes. But first, Anthony, we do have a little note over there from the P.O. Box. You want to crack that bad boy?
Sure. Check this out. We got a letter from Bryce. Thank you, Bryce.
While you're opening that, last time we did a P.O. Box letter opening segment, I did not give the P.O. Box number on the episode. But P.O. Box is P.O. Box 4855, Baltimore, Maryland, 21211. If you want to send us some mail, you can send it there, and we will open it on air. And if we open it on air and it ends up being awful, then I'll just cut the segment out. But so far, it hasn't happened.
Ooh, we got an Altered Plains. I wonder, did Bryce actually... 2 Altered Plains. It looks like the Microsoft XP background. That sounds mean, but I think it looks great.
Is that mean? I mean, it's a very beautiful...
It's a beautiful hill. They chose it for a reason.
Oh, yeah, look at this little hand-painted altar here. I think it honestly is trying to be the Microsoft XP background.
It might be. Hi, Andy and Anthony. Enclosed are 2 planes that I painted. Thank you so much, Bryce. These are beautiful.
These are really great.
After graduating college last May, I had a wave of free time and it turned to art. Something I'm not particularly good at, but still enjoy. This sort of parallels my experience playing Magic over the past 12 years, if I'm being honest. Well, hopefully recognizable, this is Bliss Hill, known for being the Windows default background. You did it perfectly. You smashed it out of the park,
Got it in one. Bryce, you nailed it.
Bliss Hill is in Sonoma County, California, right near where I grew up. It's a vineyard now and holds a different aesthetic, but still a cool piece of local history. I'm a huge fan of the cast and really enjoy your conversations both on technicals of Cube and the textual, meta, and artistic aspects of gameplay, experience, and community. Looking forward to keeping both of you early August. Looking forward to see you as well, Bryce.
These rule. Thank you, Bryce. Obviously, you did nail it.
I think he's actually going to be in town this week.
Oh, is this
Great.
Is this
the Truffle Hunter?
So 2 days from now, the day this episode comes out.
Turn to your left, Bryce. I'm right there.
Yeah. If you're listening to this and we're near you, you have to stop. That's weird. Turn the podcast off.
That's a rule.
Listen when we're not around you. These rule. Thank you for sending it in. If you want to be like Bryce, you can. P.O. Box 4855, Baltimore, Maryland 21211.
I think I'm going to put this in the land box for the Turbo Cube.
Yeah, I'm just going to put it in my binder of nice cards that I will never get rid of that have some sort of sentimental meaning to me. The mechanics of Bloomburrow, Anthony. I've got the article pulled up here. Let's just go through it in the order that Matt Tabak, rules manager, has decided to go through it. The first one is Offspring. Offspring is an additional cost you can pay when you cast a spell, an optional additional cost, so it functions just like Kicker in that way. And if you pay the Offspring cost, when the creature enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 token copy of it. So a very cool flavor
you
win,
get
I think.
An even littler little guy.
Even littler guy.
Little guys.
I think pretty much every Offspring card has some enter the battlefield ability or activated ability that means that, the value of the Offspring is rarely just the 1/1 itself. It is some additional ability that it comes with.
Yeah, a lot of them have triggered abilities which scale, which is pretty cool. So It's like, well, for a cheap cost, I can get this one time, but if I have the extra mana too, I'll double it up and get a ton of value out of it.
Yeah, the example card they have here is Tender Wild Guide, which is a 2-mana 2/2 with Offspring for 2 generic mana. It's a Possum Druid.
I'm here for druids.
Shout out to Maramas, finally immortalized on a card. It taps for a mana of any color, and it also taps to put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. So for 4 mana, you get a 2/2 and a 1/1, both of which tap for mana and tap to grow themselves if you want. I think it's mechanic rules.
Yeah, it's cool. It's pretty easy to understand. I think the most important thing about this mechanic is there is actually a printed token that is a cute little baby version of each of these cards. From a cube design perspective, that's a little bit less appealing to have a whole bunch more unique tokens, but honestly, because you're very often going to have, the first creature in play, you can use an upside down card to represent it pretty easily, so I'm not too worried about that. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is also just a very flexible mechanic that, like you said, you can do all kinds of things. Like, they can design all kinds of creatures that just have effects that are valuable when doubled up. I think this will work as one-off cards as well in pretty much every case.
Yeah, the one and only downside for me is the unique token thing, like you mentioned, but because, you'll have the original version in play, until that one gets removed and the token remains, I do think that in a lot of cases you can just use an upside-down card or whatever from your sideboard to represent that, and it will be totally fine with terms of tracking the board state. This could literally just be Kicker, right? Like, There's no reason mechanically this couldn't just be Kicker 2, because it says the written-out reminder text for Offspring 2 is you may pay an additional 2 when you cast a spell. If you do, when this creature enters, create a 1/1 token copy of it. So they could just say Kicker 2 and then say when the spell is kicked, when it enters the battlefield, make a 1/1 copy of it. That doesn't bother me, but interesting to note that mechanically this basically could just be Kicker.
But I think it's still helpful to sort of like be able to shortcut all the stuff that is encoded in that. I think when you're actually playing Bloomburrow, it's going to be really easy to understand, oh yeah, Offspring, make a little 1/1.
And I think hopefully, at least the one they've shown here of his Tender Wild Guide, it's got a little Offspring in the art, which I hope all of them do, because that's cool.
I think they do.
All right, so Offspring, we love it, and cute little token. The next mechanic listed here is Gift. Gift is also an additional cost at casting a spell, and the cost is different depending on the card. So a lot of these cards say gift a card, in which case when you cast a spell, you may have an opponent draw a card, and if they do, then the spell is effectively kicked. It gets another effect if the spell was gifted, or if a gift was promised, I guess is the actual word. There's also some that say gift a fish, and then you give your opponent a 1/1 tapped fish token. There's probably some other ones in here, too. I haven't looked at all of them in detail, but it's basically like...
Some of them give a treasure token, and I think something else. It's I think, pretty flexible in terms of the way the mechanic actually works, so you could give a lot of different gifts.
It's, again, another modal spell mechanic. The gift thing never costs you more mana, so the modality here is not at all constrained by mana. You're paying the mana cost on the top right, then you get to choose modes based on what the board state looks like, what the game state looks like. When I first saw this mechanic, I was like, okay, this is clearly designed for multiplayer, because you get to choose any opponent to give the gift to, which makes a lot of sense in a multiplayer game. If we're playing a 3-player game and, person C is winning by a huge margin, then I, person A, get to cast my spell, give something to player B, and also make my spell a lot better at the same time. There's, of course, no reason that these cards couldn't also be designed and balanced in a way that makes them really appealing in one-on-one play. And I think there are a couple cards that kind of fit that bill. But what do you think of this mechanic overall?
I actually really like it, especially, on the surface, maybe it's not something that seems really splashy and catches my attention. It obviously makes sense in the context of this set where they're trying to be more fun and friendly and not be so much about the dark aspects of the flavor that so often Magic is about. But I actually really like a lot of the individual card designs, especially the ones that gift a card, because many of those designs are basically get an effect or get twice that effect, destroy an artifact or destroy 2 artifacts if you gift something. And I think that fact that it's either a 1-for-1 or a 2-for-2 is kind of an interesting sort of way for this mechanic to scale. And I think especially for the ones that are going to give you a big splashy effect, like I'm going to reanimate 3 creatures and have this sort of like big turn, but also I'm giving the opponent more resources to actually deal with the big splashy thing I just did. I think it's just going to end up playing really well in a way that people might not even notice so much.
It's a cool way to make you recontextualize the value of certain resources in the game, especially the ones I think that say gift a card, where it's like, okay, is the additional effect I'm getting here going to be worth, on average, more than a mean card out of your deck, right? Than the average card you're going to draw. And that decision and that evaluation, I think, is an interesting one to make for players in that context. Looking through the set, there's a couple I do really like with this mechanic, though I do feel like a lot of them feel like they were balanced and designed with multiplayer in mind, which is, of course, totally reasonable, a very popular way to play Magic these days. So even though the mechanic, I think, in theory, has a lot of cool applications, there wasn't a lot for my cubes, or maybe anything for my cubes, frankly. I think there was one card for the Hunter Ornithopters cube I considered that actually kind of fits the bill for what I'm looking for. Interesting, there are 2 additional cost effects in the same set. I actually think I can kind of make them both a little easier to understand if you can teach new players, like, hey, one of the things you should do when you're casting spells in this set is not just look at the mana in the top right and decide if you can cast it or not, but also consider these additional costs and, think about that when you're casting things. My starter decks, which I've designed to teach people how to play Magic, the red deck specifically, one of the things I want to teach people is alternative costs. I'm like, look, a lot of the spells in this deck have either cost reduction mechanics or additional costs when you cast them or other things. So this is a deck you play when I want to teach you specifically that the mana cost in the top right is not the end-all be-all of what a card costs to play. And I think concentrating that in one deck is actually a really nice way to get that idea across to new players.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, and so many mechanics are additional cost mechanics. I feel like it's unavoidable that a lot of sets are going to have more than one.
All right, the next mechanic is Forage, which is a new keyword action. So it shows up as a cost you can pay in different contexts. Either, a spell will make you do it or an activated ability will let you do it. And to Forage, you either exile 3 cards from your graveyard or you sacrifice a food. As you might assume, food is obviously a token that is popping up quite a bit in this set to make that more reasonable. But I think in a lot of cubes, for the most part, Forage is going to be exile 3 cards from your graveyard in order to get some additional effect, which puts it in the same sort of universe as things like Delve or whatever. How do you feel about this mechanic kind of tying these two otherwise completely disparate things together, a food token and 3 cards from your graveyard with this kind of flavor of foraging?
It is a weird kind of batching of two, like you said, very different things. I totally agree that in most contexts, you're not going to have, in most cubes, you're just not going to have enough food that's going to be a really likely thing to come up unless the designer is deliberately trying to make that happen. So it is just going to be a rate limit on how quickly you can fill up the graveyard, which I think is just going to play out fine.
Yeah, this is one of those mechanics that seems like it's great for this set and might be a kind of awkward stuck into a context where we're looking at cubes with cards from all different kinds of sets, just because it is so specific to a set with a lot of food tokens running around that I think these cards will make sense for.
It's obviously a very flavorful thing, foraging, you're getting food or you're scrapping stuff together. It does kind of make sense when you read it.
I'm really curious to hear what you think of this next one, which is Valiant. Valiant is kind of like a tweak on Heroic. It's an ability word that highlights triggered abilities that trigger whenever a creature becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn. So just to contrast this with Heroic, which is whenever you target this creature with a spell, you may do the Heroic thing. This is whenever it becomes the target of a spell or ability, but limited to the first time each turn. And then a lot of the cards have what you would expect to be like kind of Heroic-esque effects stapled to it. The creature gets bigger, or, you get an impulsive draw, or there's a lot of things that can happen on this trigger. It depends on the card that it's being stapled onto, but really just kind of a riff on Heroic that, I don't know. What are your thoughts first?
I mean, I probably not surprisingly really like this mechanic. In my primary cube, I have a little bit of a Heroic theme, and in that environment, it's also slow enough pace that I feel like the limitation that it only triggers once a turn is actually not going to come up all that often, like not enough that you would drastically change the evaluation of these cards. And the fact that it triggers on abilities means a lot of incidental things like an equipment or a creature that when it enters the battlefield gives a buff to another creature. Things like that are actually just going to feel much more natural that it's also possible to trigger Valiant with those effects. So overall, I'm really into this mechanic, and I don't want to give any spoilers yet, so that's all I'm giving you.
I like it a lot too. I think it is a take on Heroic that allows them to make cards that are going to be more evenly spread in terms of their power level. A lot of the Heroic cards tend to be like kind of awful if you can't trigger them at all, and then kind of really strong if you can trigger them, especially repeatedly. And here, the fact that more things are going to trigger it, and the abilities, I think, is a big upside people shouldn't overlook. I mean, the equipment you mentioned is a big one, but also there's a raft of popular cards people play in cubes that just allow you to target your creatures repeatedly every turn, right? Like, if you want to risk your Mother of Runes to continue to trigger Valiant, you can do that, which makes it all the more important they put the limit to triggering once a turn on it, which I think a lot of players' first response was, oh, this is nerfed Heroic because it can only trigger once a turn. But of course, whether it's more or less powerful has nothing to do with the mechanic itself and everything to do with the actual payoffs, right? If you took the exact same card and swapped out Heroic for Valiant, yes, maybe in that given card's context, it would be a nerf. But I think given the way that Valiant is written, they can make much more powerful triggers that happen because they're limited to once a turn, whereas that thing might be broken if it had Heroic and you could just trigger it indefinitely. So hard to disagree with anybody that considers this just a nerf on Heroic. I kind of like this better in terms of where the power is distributed along the range of possible outcomes for an individual card. And I think there's some cool designs with it, too.
Can you equip an equipment to a creature that's already equipped? You can, right? That's what we learned from Nadu.
I believe you can. That is what you learned from Nadu and
cool.
Should Go Nonsense. That is maybe the one thing I don't love about the mechanic, that people will have to know that to benefit from it, and new players will probably not think they can just, keep putting their short sword on their thing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, to be fair, it's for the first time each turn, so you're not missing out on a huge amount of value, but still. I feel like there's a lot of mechanics in this set. We still got more coming here.
There are so many mechanics, and I feel like there's even a bunch more that are not explicitly, the headline mechanics that we should touch on as well.
Well, the next name mechanic is Expend, and Expend is a rules term that just tracks how much mana you've spent to cast spells over the course of the turn. Most of the cards I've seen have Expend 4, so whenever you expend 4, meaning whenever you cast a spell that expends your 4th or greater mana for the turn. It's hard to say it out loud. Like, if you cast a 2-drop and then another 2-drop, when you cast that second 2-drop, you've now expended 4. Same as if you were just to cast a 4-drop, you would be expending 4 immediately.
Or if you crack a food and then cast a 2-drop, you're good. But if you cast a 2-drop and then crack a food, not so much.
Wait, what? Cracking a food never... Activating abilities doesn't expend anything.
It does not, but if you spend that mana on food and then you spend your 4th mana of the turn, right?
What? 4th total mana to cast spells.
Right, so you've... is that true?
Like, there's no way that's true. That would be insane.
I think it's as long as the 4th mana that you spend for a turn is on a spell.
Let's see here. Looking for you to spend your 4th total mana to cast spells during a turn. Blah, 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 blah. Ability like blah, blah, blah. Permanent ability to the battlefield. Doesn't matter what happened to the spells you cast. It could have resolved... All the mana you spend to cast spells counts. There's no way that what you're saying makes any sense.
Okay, well, you know what? Don't come here for rules clarifications. Go listen to the GLHF Judge Rob
I'll confirm
episode.
with Bones, but that would be insane if they would basically say, yeah, you can spend all that mana on abilities as long as your actual 4th mana is spent on a spell, then you count as expending 4.
I don't think that would be insane.
I think it'd be insane.
They can make the rules work however they want.
It would just be so dumb, because you would, for that sequencing to matter in that way, and for have to care about what literally happened to your 4th mana, not whether or not you spent 4 total, that seems crazy to me. Anyway, I'm pretty sure I got it right. We'll confirm with Judge Bones. Another opportunity to use my cool Judge Bones stinger.
We read some cards, but we got confused. How do they work? We don't know. Oh, we're in trouble and there's only one person we can call. Judge Bones!
Who?
Judge Bones!
All rise for the Honorable Judge Bones.
Hello. The short answer is I totally understand the confusion, but it is just the 4th mana you spend on spells this turn. The long answer, the reason that it is confusing twofold, is that mechanically it's phrased as you spend your 4th mana on spells. And so I could see how you would think if you spent, 3 on abilities and 1 on a spell, then there's your 4th mana spent on a spell. However, that's just a reminder text that is maybe in a little bit confusing phrasing, that it actually means 4th mana on spells, as in 1, 2, 3, 4, all on spells in the same turn. The second reason that I find it confusing for flavor reasons is they're raccoons, and I feel like food should work with raccoons. I don't know why more so than other creature types, but it just seems right. But no, not the case. It is actually 4 mana on spells in the same turn. So if you spend 3 on a creature with Expend 4, and then a 4th on another spell, it will trigger, having seen that you have already spent 3 on spells this turn, even itself, and a 4th on something else. Hopefully that makes more sense.
This is kind of cool. I feel like oftentimes we've gotten mechanics that are like, oh, when you cast a spell with mana value 4 or greater, or when you cast a creature that has power whatever or greater. A lot of these spells that basically are rewarding you for doing a lot in one turn have always been about casting a big thing. With the exception being, we have gotten quite a few things that say when you cast your second spell a turn, which is a little bit different. This is another way in that same space of the kinds of triggers you get on Clarion Spirit, or the kinds of triggers you get on quick, name something that triggers when you cast a big thing. I don't play any of these cards.
Triggers when you cast a big thing.
There's a bunch of the really popular...
Ragged Draga Gorguts Boss.
Does that?
Is that what that's called?
It is what it's called.
Our new card we mention every single episode.
It's true. Anyway, this is another way to basically pay people off for doing a lot in a turn in a way that I think is very cool, right? Because a lot of the other ways that this has worked in the past, for example, I know there are things that if you like delve a spell away, it still counts as casting a spell with high mana value, which can be a way to kind of break these mechanics. Or a lot of these things don't care about casting multiple spells, they care about casting one big spell. Here is this like really nice even keel way to just say, like, if you did a lot this turn, you get a benefit, which I do think fundamentally has a little bit of a snowballing risk, because you already want to spend a lot of mana on a turn. You already want to be using all your resources every turn as much as possible to curve out and do whatever your deck's game plan is. And so rewarding you for that could be a little snowbally. But in my experience playing things like Clarion Spirit and Bloodsky Berserker, I tend to really like the kinds of things that reward players for doing what I already want them to be doing, which is spending their resources.
Yeah, I'm less excited about this mechanic. It just doesn't aesthetically seem as interesting. Like the sequencing of casting
clunky.
2 spells a turn, I feel like, yeah, like I'm going to hold back a spell 1 turn so I can get that trigger next. Here, that still is technically true. I don't know, but it doesn't appeal to me as much. I'm sure a lot of the individual cards
I think it's just not as clean. You're right. Yeah. It's like Expend. I mean, you didn't even know what it did.
I still don't know what it does.
Assuming you're wrong, which I think you are. We'll confirm with Judge Bones. Maybe I don't know what
you're wrong.
One of us didn't know what it did. One of us didn't know what it did. Yeah, I think it's not quite as clean as some other mechanics we've seen in this space, but I actually think the play patterns are going to be among the best of these kinds of mechanics. So a trade-off to be had there for sure. We'll have to see how it plays out, I guess. I didn't realize this mechanic was actually called Pawprint Season. That's just the title on this.
I think it's just not actually named on the cards, but the cycle it's on are all season of in the name of the cards.
We got little pawprint symbols. There is a cycle of mythic rare sorceries.
We got little pawprint symbols.
The little guys are leaving their little feet marks all over the place. We've got a cycle of mythic rare sorceries, 1 in each color, and they are modal spells that each have modes that cost a different amount. And they've invented this resource that is only on these spells and only exists for the purpose of allocating the number of times you choose each of these modes. So they each have a 1 pawprint mode, a 2 pawprint mode, a 3 pawprint mode, and obviously the ones that are more pawprints have more impact on the game. So it's a way for them to like play with a modal spell that has modes one mode you can choose 5 times, and one mode you can never choose more than once, and you can then combine these in a lot of different permutations of ways. You have obviously
you can do 5 1s, you can do a 2 and 3 1s, 2 2s and 1, a 3 and a 2 and a 1. No, that's 6.
A 3 and a 2, a 3 and a 1 and a 1,
a 3 and 2 1s. We did it. Were you counting?
Just 5 different modes. Does that make sense?
Okay, so it's not that complicated.
3 1 1 1 2 1 2 2. 5 1s. 3 1s. 2 1s.
This is excellent content.
3. Yeah, I think it's just 5 actually. That's less than I would have thought. I think it's fitting that they put these on just these mythic rare cards because it's a little weird. It's a strange way to do this. It doesn't matter what the symbol is, obviously. They had to choose something that was not a resource symbol in any other part of Magic. It's probably the cleanest way to do this thing. Like, I can't think of a cleaner way to do it, but it feels pretty strange to have these, like, self-contained little resource that you just use on the modes, and then
I am a little curious how this mechanic came about. I mean, the core idea of, like, we are familiar with modal spells, you know, pick 2 of these 4, seen lots of those cards before.
Which almost all of them have, like, well, these are the 2 you want to do. Like, these are the best ones.
Right, or, you know, ideally those are designed such that all of those modes are similar. So it's, like, depending on the situation.
It's hard to do that.
So what this mechanic lets them do is make modes that are of different levels of impact so that you can do one mode a bunch of times if it's kind of this low impact one. I wonder if they started with that question of, like, how do we do modality with different, like, levels of weighting, and then came to this idea of these symbols, or if they were just like, how do we get cute little pawprint symbols on the cards?
I think it's the first one,
either way.
I'm not sure.
But if it was the first one, yeah, I think that's a very clever solution, and I can't really think of a better way to do that.
I can't either. But it only shows up on this particular cycle of spells, so if you like one of those spells, then you'll probably be fine with the mechanic. I don't know, a mechanic kind of in name only. Like, these spells could have also...
Sure,
not really a mechanic.
It could always be kicker.
It's not kicker.
But it could be
this
kicker.
One could be kicker.
You could
this one could not be kicker.
It could be kicker. Anything could be kicker. Give me a second. I'm going to figure it out.
I'm trying to do something. They don't mention it in the mechanics article because it is not a named mechanic, but this is also a set that cares a lot about creature types. There are tons of creature type matters cards in this set, and I would describe it as kind of the core theme of the set to me is a creature type matters kindred set.
Yeah, I think that's really something that we should dive into a little bit because it's a huge theme of the set, and I think it's really interesting the way that they have evolved a lot of these All right, I felt called out, to be honest, the other day when Magic Data Science tweeted something about, I can't believe that content creators still don't know the difference between Kindred and Typal, and it's like, I don't.
Can't you?
I don't care.
Can't
that
you
much.
Magic the Gathering data science?
Well, they just replaced one word with two other words that are really similar, and it's. What do you expect? What do you want from us? So these creature type and matters
we're
mechanics.
extremely disengaged.
Yeah,
Don't forget that.
Just don't worry about it. It's fine. They've done a number of things to sort of mitigate some of the challenges they've had with creature type matters mechanics in the past, where it's sort of like, yeah, you're in the elves deck. The elves boost all the other elves and benefit from more elves, so you're just drafting elves or zombies or goblins or whatever it is. That can be kind of railroady, and you just end up in that one silo. So some of the things they've done is there is a lot of batching. So cards will say, whenever you cast a squirrel, or I'm forgetting them already, a squirrel
Whenever
or a raccoon
one
or a rabbit.
or more other rabbits, bats, birds, and or mice you control enter, scry 1.
There's also a ton of cards that they don't, there are very few lords in the set, cards that just say, all of your rabbits get +1/+1. A lot of the cards just care about having at least one other of a creature type. So it'll say, when this enters the battlefield, if you have a rabbit, you get a little bit of a bonus.
Which is kind of like Party, in a way, where it didn't want you to have a zillion wizards. It was like, just have one.
You have to
in
have
your
at
party.
least. So when you're drafting, it's like, well, I want 7 rabbits in my deck. It's not that every single rabbit makes every other one of my rabbits better, such that I want to just, push as hard down that path as possible. It's just about getting enough of them, which I think really, really goes a long way to ameliorating some of these issues that you might have in a draft set. And I think that also makes these cards a lot more applicable to cubes as well, where you might not have that huge density of cards, but it might not be that hard to get enough bats in a deck to be able to make some of these cards work. Also, a lot of the rewards are sort of like additional benefits. If you have a bat, you gain a little bit of life as well. So it's not like the cards are all or nothing and just don't function. One other thing we have is multi-type creatures. There's, I think, maybe 2 changelings, but there's also, cards that are pairing. So this is a rabbit mouse, and that's just going to trigger all your things that care about having either a rabbit or a mouse.
There are rabbit mice?
I might just be making that one up.
That's 2 species.
Right. There are multi-species cards.
There are?
That just have a cute little pairing of cards.
Here's a rat squirrel, Daggerfang duo, bat lizard. Okay. So yeah, I get it. It's not one creature in the flavor. In the flavor, it is 2 organisms that are represented on one card. Okay. That makes a lot more sense.
And then the last thing that they're doing that I think works really well is that a lot of the creature types also have sort of a mechanic associated with them. So rats care about threshold, otters are caring about spell casting, a lot of them have prowess, birds obviously care about flying and other birds.
Birds always be caring about flying.
That's like their whole thing. And then you meet a penguin and you're like, what are you doing, guy? Which I think just works really well because you can be caring about rats, but you're also caring about mill. So it both makes the creature types make more sense and work in other contexts, but also just means your deck can be a little bit about a creature type, but also be about a particular strategy and theme. So all the non-creature spells that play into that theme are also going to support that creature type matters deck. So I think all these things together, I think really are going to work well to solve some of the issues they've had in the past with really heavy creature type matters themes.
Yeah. I will say as a cube designer, I always am kind of a little bummed to see a creature type matter set just because I know there's going to be a whole set of cards that are just kind of going to be ruled out for my own personal cube design goals because I don't run a density of rabbit or mice or squirrels or bats or whatever. So Yet. So while I agree that I think the mechanics are better at solving those problems, within this set and maybe in standard or whatever context these cards show up in a higher density, still, for the most part, I think the creature type matters stuff for cubes that are not about creature types tend to be kind of awkward fits at best.
Yeah, I actually found that a lot with cards that would be totally reasonable in one of my cubes, but it's just like, this is the removal spell of the set that gives you a bonus if you control a bat. That little extra bit of trinket text is kind of going to make it something that I just rather have a card that is simpler and doesn't have those extra words on it.
There was a card I was thinking of putting in the Hunter Ornithopters cube that had one of those pieces of text, and it's like, well, that's extremely silly because there are
no birds or bats or
that's all it is. It's all you get.
It might also be worth pointing out that Offspring also works with a lot of the creature type matters because you're immediately getting 2 of them. So some of the Offspring cards care about, for example, whenever you do a thing, your mice get a bonus. And if you've already gotten at least 2 mice in because of the Offspring, it's just going to make those cards make a little bit more sense, even outside of the context of a really heavy creature type matters context.
Are there other unnamed mechanics that you want to draw attention to here, Anthony?
There is. I think one of the most obvious ones is classes are back. So these are cards that look kind of like sagas, but
Yeah, they didn't mention
give
that
you an
at all.
effect immediately, and then you can pay cost to sort of level them up, but not with a counter for some reason. I guess they're
Still don't get
too
that.
easy to cheat them by proliferating, and then that's probably why, because some of them you have to pay like 6 mana to get to the last chapter, and that would, or not chapter. The words are complicated. There's so many things.
Yeah, it's got to be proliferate. You're probably right about that.
So classes are back, and it is funny how, the first time they made classes, it was like, this is one of the big headline mechanics of the set, and I was just like, yeah, we're just going to do this again and not mention it.
Yeah, kind of wild they didn't mention it, because it is a named mechanic.
It is.
And it's not a thing that has shown up a lot. Has it literally only been in that one D&D set and then not again?
I think there was one other case.
Was it
Maybe
also
just
in,
the
like,
once.
Kaldheim?
It's not in Kaldheim.
Looks like just D&D, Bloomburrow, and the associated commander products. Yeah, that's it.
How do you feel about classes?
I don't know, kind of neutral. There's one I do really like in this set, just in isolation as a card design. I think these cards tend to have a lot of text that doesn't matter on them because one of these levels is likely to be the one you actually care about. And sometimes it's nice to have a mana sink. Well, okay, I got nothing else to do with my mana. I guess I'll make it to the third level, which I otherwise don't really care about and didn't put the card in my deck for. But the combination of the fact you don't track it with a counter, so you have to just kind of remember. I feel like some of the ones I've played with before from the D&D set seem to be designed in a way that would make it easier to remember whether you had gone up a level or not. They would make a token or something.
I mean, let's be real. You're going to put a dice on these to keep track of where they're at.
Yeah, you are. It's true. You definitely are. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have strong feelings about them. I guess I don't love... I like sagas. I think sagas are cool. I am attracted to their flavor. The art is always very evocative on them because of the vertical formatting. I don't feel any of that affection for classes. They feel kind of like a uninspired saga to me, frankly.
Sure, yeah, something about the mechanic as well to me doesn't aesthetically appeal quite as much. I did think it was really funny, so we actually had in our Cube Night last week, somebody opened a Lore Seeker, or they drafted a Lore Seeker, and opened up a pack of Bloomburrow, and Hunter's Talent, which is an uncommon from the set, just wrecked people. This card seemed insane.
Yeah, I think it's great.
And it was just sort of a sign of the times that we were playing this pretty high-powered cube, and this uncommon from the latest set just was really, really impactful.
What do you think of classes? Do you have a strong opinion about them?
I feel similarly. Most of them are just there's a lot more words here than are going to matter most of the time, so I generally am not, unless they were doing something really specific and solving some problem for a particular cube, they're not the kind of card I would go to first. We've already mentioned this, but there's just a fair amount of food in the set, including this whole mechanic that's based off of using the food for alternate things, which I think is cool. I feel like when food was first used in Eldraine, it was a little bit just sort of slowed down the environment a lot because people were just gaining a bunch of incidental life through all the food that was around. So I think that this is a pretty deliberate sort of trying to use food as a resource is maybe going to just play better. So I think that's a cool use of food. We also mentioned Threshold is on a number of cards specifically associated with rats, and the last kind of mechanical theme that stood out to me is there's a bunch of stuff that just cares about tokens, and I think a lot of that is specifically because Offspring is one of the key mechanics, so it's things that, without directly referencing Offspring, still get to care about that mechanic. That's a lot. There's a lot of stuff going on in this set.
Should we get to the cards we care about for our own cube environments?
Let's do it.
I have a few things to discuss for 100 Ornithopters, a few things to discuss for Bun Magic, but not super long lists for either.
I have a couple things for regular cube and a couple things for turbo cube. Where should we start?
I'll go first. I feel like I usually make you go first. I'm going to go first this time. So first, let's talk about the 100 Ornithopters cube. This has been my most recent design project. It is a cube where the only creatures are 100 copies of the card Ornithopter. There are no other creature tokens. There's no way to make your land into a creature except for the one Mycosynth Guardians, which you can turn into an Ornithopter. You got to kill people with Ornithopters. And also, there are no win conditions that are unrelated to Ornithopters. You have to use the Ornithopters as a core resource in that cube. This environment has ended up being more interesting than I initially thought the idea was going to be. We've talked about it a lot on past episodes. If you want to go check those out, I'll put them in the show notes. But there is actually an interesting range here between fair, aggressive decks that are just trying to make their Ornithopters big and attack, and combo decks and more weird value engines that are trying to abuse the fact that they have, a bunch of 0 drops in their deck with things like Paradoxical Outcome or Glimpse of Nature or stuff that is just doesn't make sense in any other environment but becomes kind of power in that context. So there is a range of possible decks that can function. A couple honorable mentions for this cube from this set. Things I'm not even sure are going to make it in, but I did want to call out. One is Heirloom Epic. This is a 1 generic mana artifact. It has an activated ability. Pay 4 and tap it to draw a card, and you can basically convoke that activated ability. You can tap a creature instead of paying one of those costs. Obviously, the dream here is opening hand, 1 mana, 4 Ornithopters, Heirloom Epic, insert something else.
The dream.
Dream.
You can draw your win condition later.
You just draw 2 cards every turn. I actually don't think this is that great. A lot of people point this out to me because it is the kind of thing that can abuse the fact that you can get a bunch of cheap creatures into play early, but I think it's really inefficient, and if you're tapping all those Ornithopters to your Heirloom Epic, then you're not using them for something else. I compare this to a card I've really liked in this cube, which is Military Intelligence. It's a 2 blue mana enchantment that just says when you attack with 2 more creatures, draw a card. I think that card's way better than Heirloom Epic is, and there are so many kind of broken card advantage cards here that I don't think I need a kind of clunky, slow one, but people have pointed it out to me, so I wanted to acknowledge it. In a similar vein, I want to acknowledge Dawn's Truce. This is 1 and a white for an instant. It has the gift a card mechanic, so you can either have your opponent draw a card when you cast it or not. You and permanents you control gain hexproof till end of turn if the gift was promised, so if you let your opponent draw a card. Permanents you control also gain indestructible until end of turn. This is just a riff on Heroic Intervention, which has been fine in this cube, and to be perfectly honest, I have struggled to find enough white cards to fit, so I honestly might just be like, what if Heroic Intervention was white? Because this has A, very sick art, and B, would allow me to free up some space in green, which is chock-a-block full of great cards in the 100 Ornithopters cube, and give white a little more action. Season of Gathering is another card I want to call out here as a strong maybe, but not super excited about. 4 green for a sorcery. It's the Pawprint mode card. So the 1 Pawprint mode is put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. It gains Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. The 2 Pawprint mode is choose artifact or enchantment, destroy all permanents of the chosen type. The 3 Pawprint mode, draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Here, this is basically going to be a Moldal board wipe or overrun. And I don't know how good it is to have that modality. There's good and obviously extremely different contexts. There is a lot of +1/+1 counters matter stuff in this cube. There's a couple of different hardened scales effects, so it's entirely possible that doing 5 of that first Pawprint mode would just be way better than an overrun. Putting a ton of power and toughness across the board, giving everything trample, could be really, really powerful.
The trample's really, really relevant, I've found, in this environment.
Trample's really important. It really matters quite a bit because inherently there's a lot of big butts running around because Ornithopters got big butts.
And just like chump blockers.
Yeah. And then also just being able to destroy all artifacts or enchantments seems like it could be very good.
And you can destroy all artifacts and enchantments. Because you can choose the second mode twice.
Oh, yes.
You got 5 Pawprints to go.
Yes, you could definitely
around.
do that. You could do that mode twice and then also put a +1/+1 counter on a creature that's about to die. That's an option.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the creature's indestructible. It's possible. I don't know. A lot going on here, but it is 6 mana. And this is kind of a ruthless environment with regards to mana efficiency. And you can do a lot with very little mana in this cube. So,
is there anything in this cube that isn't an artifact or enchantment? Obviously, there's lands.
There's instant sorceries.
But there's no planeswalkers, and there's no other creatures.
There's very, very few select planeswalkers, because I can't have planeswalkers that make tokens.
Right.
And I can't have planeswalkers that are win conditions on their own without Ornithopters. So
right, you do have the
there's Duretti, Scrap Savant, and is that maybe it?
This card does cost 6 mana, but I feel like the modality being such different modes, the fact that it is basically like a planar cleansing, or a huge draw spell, or a huge pump spell, I think is going to make it probably really powerful in that environment.
Ooh, the other planeswalker is Tamiyo, Collector of Tales.
Right.
Very sick in this cube. Those are the only 2 planeswalkers. So, yeah, it is going to be a destroy all non-land permanents, except for maybe those 2 planeswalkers, or an overrun. I don't know. The 3 cards that I actually think have some promise here, 2 of them are classes, and I don't really know how to evaluate these. The first is Gossip's Talent. This is a class for 1 and a blue. The first level is whenever a creature you control enters Surveil 1. This is the main reason this card would be in the cube, and I don't know how good that is. Just every time you cast an Ornithopter, you get to Surveil 1. There are decks here that are designed around casting your Ornithopters many, many times over. There's a lot of Retract and Hurkyl's Recall effects, which you put all your Ornithopters back in your hand and play them all again. You can Paradoxical Outcome, play them all again. It's entirely possible that this would just allow you in the right deck to essentially tutor the card you need to the top of your deck, or dig halfway through your deck to find whatever combo piece you're looking for. And whether this card makes it entirely depends on how good that first level is. The other levels are, level 2, you can pay 1 and a blue to make it so whenever you attack, target attacking creature with power 3 or less can't be blocked this turn. Maybe that will come up, but if it's got power 3 or less, you need some instant speed way to pump it for it to matter that you can make it unblockable. The last level then is 3 and a blue, so 4 mana total for that level, and it would have been a total of 8 mana across all of the costs for this card. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may exile it, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. Very hard to construct a situation where that would matter in this cube. You could have Impact Tremors.
You do get to Surveil again.
You do get to Surveil again, and you do have Impact Tremors.
Probably lost whatever was allowing that Ornithopter to do damage.
It's no longer got counters on it. It's no longer got equipment on it. So, yeah, it really comes down to that first level, and I don't know how to evaluate it. What do you've got the most trophies in this cube of anybody.
I wouldn't play
Not
this
playing
because
decks like this.
it isn't a green card that says your Ornithopter has power now.
Okay, well then moving on, the next one I'm interested in is Innkeeper's Talent. This is 1 and a green for a class, and the first level is the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Once again, this is probably the most important mode on this card. It's just a Luminarch Aspirant that is not a creature and is on a green enchantment. Now, 1 +1/+1 counter does not matter almost at all here because a 1/3 doesn't do anything against 2 blockers. But the second one matters a lot, and there are a lot of ways to double up your counters and just kind of make them snowball out of control. I'll mention level 2 because I think it could come up. It's just a single green mana to make it so permanents you control with counters on them have ward 1. Could be annoying. We like to annoy people. Level 3 for...
Is that what this podcast is about?
I don't know. Some people would say it is. Level 3 for 3 and a green. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each of those kinds of counters on that permanent or player instead. So actually very nice to have a mana sink here that turns into yet another Hardened Scales effect.
Very relevant when you're going to be putting a counter on something at least once a turn.
Yeah. This one I'm more hopeful could be good. It's more a question of like, what do I cut to make space for this? But I think this one's definitely worth playing.
Yeah, I mean, it seems strong. I want to compare it to Luminarch Aspirant and say it's actually in some ways a lot better because it's more difficult to remove, but specifically in the Ornithopter cube, there is just a lot of enchant removal and you want to prioritize it, so I think that might not actually be the case.
Well, and importantly, you can't play Luminarch Aspirant anyway, so comparing it to that in this context doesn't really matter.
Sure. I also think it's maybe just like a lot less powerful than Curse of Predation and Beastmaster Ascension, so it might not actually be super, super strong, but I'm curious to see what happens.
You say this, but you also say that you have never actually used Beastmaster Ascension to make your Ornithopters big
right,
ever.
But I'm still confident it's great. I'm going to keep drafting it until I'm proven wrong.
Curse of Predation is excellent. For those who don't know, this is a 3-mana curse that says whenever the enchanted player is attacked, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature attacking it, which is fantastic. You just get to put a counter on all of your Ornithopters every turn, and even when they're 0/2s, you get to swing with impunity pretty much because the chances they have good blockers are very low in this environment. So that's a high bar to hit, but we are still playing things in this cube like Bone Sabers. I think it could be better than Bone Sabers. We're playing things like Life Crafter's Bestiary, which that could honestly be a cut for something like Heirloom Epic, maybe, though I have seen people go off with Life Crafter's Bestiary before.
Really?
Well, specifically with Earthcraft, you just get to chain things together because every creature makes a mana, and every mana draws you a card, and then you just keep going dummy.
I think it is really important that it only costs 2 mana. A lot of those other effects cost 3.
There's so much at 3, and honestly, for that reason alone, I'm inclined to cut a 3-drop and just move some things down the curve a little bit, just to give you more things to do on turn 2. And the last card is the one I'm probably most excited about, though I don't think it's a slam dunk. It's just 3 Tree City. It's a legendary land. When it enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. It taps for a colorless, or you can pay 2 and tap it to choose a color. Add an amount of mana of that color equal to the number of creatures you control of the chosen type. 2 of the best cards in this cube by far are Tolarian Academy and Gaia's Cradle. This is not that. Let's be clear. You gotta put 2 mana into it. It is not that. It is nowhere near as good. It takes a long time before it breaks even. But I think it has potential to be quite good, and it's the kind of card I want this cube to exist for, because if it's not good here, where is this good? So I'm excited to play 3 Tree City in this cube, regardless of whether it is super strong or not. I think it's going to stick around for a while.
Yeah, seems good.
That's under Ornithopters. Let's talk Turbo Cubes?
So there were no Ornithopters in the set, correct? Just to double check?
There were, in fact, no Ornithopters in the set. It is really easy to check this cube because I have a nice little filter written where I filter out anything type creature, anything type vehicle, anything that says, creature token. I filter all kinds of stuff. I mean, to be fair, I could be filtering out... There could be some false positives there in the creature token because...
It could be something that destroys a creature token or does something else relevant.
Or cares about them, but even then it's like, I probably don't want that card anyway because I have no creature tokens, so... It's pretty easy to find the cards that matter for Ornithopter Cube, which is nice.
All right, let's stay weird and talk about the Turbo Cube a little bit. So this is a cube where all spells and activated abilities cost 2 generic mana less, which means everybody's doing broken stuff and dumping their hand really quickly. Or not as much as we saw in Steel City Cube, where people kind of maybe broke this cube. That's what Famine told me.
So says Famine, but that's 1-3-0. Let's see
inclined
it do
to
it down
believe.
here in Baltimore,
I'm
Famine.
Inclined to believe.
Come on down to the meta that knows the
players.
cube, and let's see you do it again.
All right, so first up we got Barkform Harvester. This is 3 mana for a 2/3 artifact creature shapeshifter. It has Changeling, so it's every creature type. None of that really matters. It also has Reach. That probably doesn't really matter. The only text that matters is it has 2 mana to put target card from your graveyard on the bottom of your library. Why am I putting this in? Because Allison asked me to, and I have to listen.
Yeah, I think this is a really cool card. It has the potential to, if you can draw your whole deck, which is
You can.
entirely possible here, you can then just set up whatever you need from your graveyard. I think very cool potential combo applications here.
It could be kind of broken.
Nah.
We'll find out.
Nah, if you manage to break this, you deserve it. That's my hot take.
All right. Next up, Agate Assault. This is 2 and a red for a sorcery. It either deals 4 damage to target creature, and it will exile that creature, or exile target artifact. The biggest drawback here is just that this is a sorcery, which makes it really not as good here, but the combination of this is only going to cost 1 red mana to destroy most of the creatures that you would care about, or an artifact, and there are a ton of artifacts that you do care about in this environment. I'm going to look at the removal suite that's there currently, because you do kind of want to have 1 or 2 of these in your deck to be able to deal with some hate bears. The additional modality of being able to remove an artifact might still make this worth it, but maybe not.
Do you not have enough of these cards already? I mean, I haven't looked
I would be swapping it out for one that's already there.
Yeah,
that
there's
doesn't
just
have
so
the
many.
modality.
Yeah, I guess. Really hard for me to want to put a sorcery in my deck.
Fair.
To be frank. That, specifically a sorcery that is meant to be like interaction. Because
right.
so many things, by the time that the turn is passed, the damage is so far gone that it does not matter. You have removal for it now.
I do really enjoy the flavor text as well. Only an amateur crushes their enemies with a cold rock.
Got hit him with a
It's
hot rock.
nice. It's subtle. Just like it doesn't matter. You hit them with a rock. I guess the rock exiles them if they're hot instead of just killing them outright. Next up, Coruscation Mage. This is 1 and a red for a 2/2 Otter Wizard. It has Offspring for 2. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. This is also in a space where there are already a lot of cards that are similar to this, but lets you turn casting lots of spells into damage. The Offspring is a little bit of extra text, but I don't care about that in this cube. This cube, we're going wild. We're doing whatever, making everything complicated.
Just to clarify, so people know, how does your rules change work with Offspring?
So the way that the rules work is you add all additional costs, and then you apply discounts, so this would cost 1 and a red.
So what do you mean the Offspring's extra text? Offspring is critical here. That makes it so much better.
Well, sure. It makes it just a more complicated card than I would want maybe in...
You think no one's ever going to cast it just for 1 red because Offspring is so obviously...
No, I think you'd usually just cast it for 1 red.
No, I think you're almost always casting it for the Offspring. You're going to double the damage.
Cool, let's take a look at how cute this token is.
I think Offspring really matters here. I think it's a huge payoff for actually getting to 2 mana.
Token... It's not the top tier. That's pretty cute. All right, so I'm a little bit more skeptical of these next 2, but Heaped Harvest is 2 and a green for an artifact food. When Heaped Harvest enters, and when you sacrifice it, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it into the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. It also has the food text of you can sacrifice it for 2 mana and gain 3 life. So in the Turbo Cube, because both the sacrificing and the cost are discounted, this is just 1 green mana for 3 life and 2 basic lands. They are tapped.
And they are basic lands.
And they are basics. One of the challenges with drafting this cube is you want to play a really low land count, and you want to make sure you have all your colors, so actually fitting your basics into your deck can be really, really difficult. So
one of my big level ups in this cube, I feel like, was just completely ignoring any card that cared about basic lands.
Yeah, and I've even cut some, like Armillary Sphere, which gets 2 basics, seemed like it would be a totally busted card, and actually was almost unplayable.
I think it was bad, yeah.
So yeah, I think for that reason, this is probably not going to end up making the cut, but I wanted to note it. Next up, I'm also skeptical of this, but Stocking the Pantry, just 1 green mana.
Oh, I'm not
Whenever you put a
this.
1/1 counter on a creature you control, put a supply counter on Stocking the Pantry. It's an enchantment. And you can pay 2, or, nothing because it's a Turbo Cube. Remove a supply counter from Stocking the Pantry and draw a card.
Look at this art, Anthony. How could you be skeptical
of this art? It's a cute little squirrel.
This art
It should be, a Mana Gorger Hydra coming in and packing its little acorns into wherever a Mana Gorger Hydra lives.
I'm not skeptical of this at all. I think this is so sick and potentially broken. I think you're probably responding to the fact that it doesn't do anything on its own.
Yeah, it doesn't do anything on its own, or you have Tireless Tracker, or Mana Gorger Hydra, or a couple other things.
Walking Ballista, or there's quite a few things that get plus and plus
Arcbound Ravager.
Yeah. I think it's great. And
all right, here we go. Scroll time.
If the Turbo Cube is not the home for stocking the Pantry, then we need to make a new cube that's a home for stocking the Pantry.
The Pantry Cube.
This card rules. It's so cool.
This next card also has the sorcery challenge, but it's wear down, 1 and a green. Sorcery, gift a card, destroy target artifact or enchantment. If the gift was promised, instead destroy 2 artifacts or enchantments. Again, this is powerful sorcery. Removal, but the fact that it's a sorcery, yeah, okay, we're giving it the thumbs down.
Big thumbs down for me, personally.
Goodbye, Beaver.
Goodbye, Beaver.
Last card, Briya Riptide Rogue. This is 2 blue-red for a 3/3 legendary otter rogue. It has prowess. Other creatures you control also have prowess. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. That's what I'm also skeptical of. Spending 2 mana on a card is a lot. However, this is just like a really interesting, very aggressive win condition, which would be something different than blue-red is usually doing here. So I think I'm going to try it, despite also having another card with the same cost, which also feels weird to me.
What was the name of the card?
Briya Riptide Rogue.
Is it from the Commander set?
No.
Why can't I find it?
I don't know.
Oh, it's only in the starter decks. It's not in the main set.
Oh. I don't know how cards work these days.
No, totally fine. I was just looking at I was just scrolling through the spoiler. Yeah, it's only in the starter deck, so. Can I maybe try and sell you on something else?
Okay, so you have no opinions on Briya Riptide Rogue.
It's fine. I don't know. I mean, I'm not taking it highly, so I don't know. It's fine. Whatever.
Okay.
There's a card in this set which I think is one of the coolest cards I've ever seen, and I don't think it's excellent in the Turbo Cube, but it's the closest place, I think, to it being playable, and that's Storm Splitter. 3 and a red for a 1/4 creature otter wizard with haste, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a token. It's a copy of... Okay, it's instant or sorcery. I thought it was non-creature.
Yes, that's...
Never mind,
this is exactly the journey that I went on, because you are casting a lot of spells in the Turbo Cube. You're taking a lot of game actions, but a lot of those actions are actually just either casting free artifacts or cycling, and this only triggers on instants and sorceries.
Yeah, the fact that it has prowess, but then... Oh, no, it doesn't have prowess.
It doesn't have prowess.
The fact that so many otters in the set have prowess, and then this triggers on instant or sorceries is what got me here. But anyway, just so people know, this card is so cool because it makes a copy of itself.
And then the copies make copies of themselves.
And then the copies make copies of the spells. So you cast, 4 spells. Your first one makes a second one. Your second one makes 2 more. Your third one makes 4 more. And your fourth one makes 8 more. And you're swinging for 16.
And another great piece of flavor text here. We'll cover more ground if I split up.
That is very good.
It's pretty good.
That's very good.
Good job.
It's a good set. I like the flavor. It's very cool.
Goodbye, Otter.
Yeah, bummer. They really got me there with all the prowess and then that one only caring about instant or sorceries. They knew.
They knew.
They were like, this can't be too broken in the Turbo Cube. Bummer.
Just like the time they printed that full art crazy wizard rockets. Just for me.
They also knew. That's it for Turbo Cube?
That's it.
All right, on to the Bun Magic Cube. This is my eternal cube. It is a powerful environment that is all about playing fair Magic. By fair Magic, I mean there's no combo, there is no, winning the game out of nowhere. You have to care about tempo, you have to care about
bunnies.
Card
you
advantage.
Put all the buns in here.
You've got to, use removal and interaction strategically to stop your opponent's plan and to advance your own strategy. This cube's been on the back burner a little bit. I just like yesterday got the few cards from Modern Horizons 3 I'm going to be putting into the Bun Magic Cube finally, because I've been focusing on Hunter Ornithopters and also the Neoclassical Cube, which there's nothing here for the Neoclassical Cube, surprising nobody.
Oh, they haven't printed any cards that were printed in old border?
I don't care about the border, to be clear. I put new cards in when they are exactly perfect fits, which is rare. So none of that here. But I've got a couple cards here for the Bun Magic Cube. I think there's quite a few things that could fit. First, I have 4 cards that I am skeptical of, but definitely jumped off the page at me a little bit. These are firmly in the, I probably won't even bother going to get a copy to test it, but if someone tells me that they've seen it be sick in a similar cube, I might go out of my way to actually make that happen. The first is the infamous Cruelclaw. 1 and a black-red for a 3/3 legendary creature, Weasel Mercenary. It's got Menace, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, exile cards from the top of your library into exile a non-land card. You may cast that card by discarding a card rather than paying its mana cost. So, you get to just flip until you get to your next non-land card, and then if you want to discard any card from your hand to cast it for free, you can do that. It's a very cool card.
Is insane, right?
I don't think it's insane. What's insane about it?
Just get to cast your Blightsteel Colossus.
Okay, so if you
Uh-huh.
hit your Blightsteel Colossus as your next non-land card on top of your library, and you manage to untap with your 3/3 that you cast a turn earlier for 3 mana, and hit your opponent with it.
It's got Menace. That's what the Menace is for.
I don't think it's insane. I think it is probably not good enough here, but it is cool. And because it is cool, I was like, if someone tells me this is fun somewhere else, maybe I'll give it a shot. The next one is Hired Claw. 1 red mana for a creature lizard mercenary. It's a 1/2. Whenever you attack with 1 or more lizards, Hired Claw deals 1 damage to target opponent. And you can pay 1 and a red to put a +1/+1 counter on Hired Claw. Activate only if an opponent lost life this turn and only once each turn.
So you just got like a claw thing going on.
The trick here is that Hired Claw damages your opponent on its attack before your opponent has a chance to move to blockers. So the threat of activation on this seems really strong. They have to assume you could always make it 1 bigger than it is already before they go to blocks, which I think is going to make a 1 mana 1/2 hard to block. And in a situation where you think your opponent has a board wipe as their removal or whatever, you can just choose to invest resources in this to make it bigger over time until they deal with it. It kind of honestly feels to me like the space it might take in the Bun Magic Cube would be the space currently occupied by like a level up card. Like this is, I think, in a similar space as like Figure of Destiny or Student of Warfare. The one thing it doesn't do that those cards do is those are great top decks super late because you can just dump a bunch of mana into them, make them big threats, and this is not that. But the fact that this gives you an option to scale it over time instead of using mana to advance to cast cards out of your hand, I think it does that in a way that is better and more elegant than those cards do. So it's firmly on the fence, as mentioned.
I mean, this card seems really pushed. Like, it can just be attacking as a 3/3, kind of, on turn 2. You can also still activate on your opponent's turn, and there are tons of fetch lands and shock lands in your cube, so there's, you're saying it's a terrible top deck. It might not be that bad if you have just a bunch of extra mana, and you could just start dumping it into on your turn and your opponent's.
Do you usually have extra fetch lands left over when you're top decking?
Yeah, your opponent's going to top deck their fetch lands.
I guess. Next up in my kind of honorable mentions category here is Iridescent Vinelasher. 1 black mana for another 1/2 creature lizard assassin, this time instead of lizard mercenary. This one has Offspring 2, and it has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to target opponent. I do have a lot of fetch lands, Anthony, and this will turn all the fetch lands into shocks that just hit your opponent for 2. And if you pay 3 mana for it instead of 1, then all your shock lands deal 4 to your opponent now, which seems quite good. Mechanically, I think this card is there. I don't like this art at all. I actually really like the flavor of this set.
Wait, sorry, you said it shocks your opponent? Oh, right, because you're going to play the fetch land
Yeah.
and get... Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying now. I see what you're saying.
So then fetch lands deal 4
Yeah.
if you have the Offspring token in play as well. You just get to go dummy.
I don't love... I mean, he is a funny little guy.
I like so much of the art in this set. This particular one, I think, is just a little bit off. The perspective is off. It's a little much. Yeah, I don't know. This card isn't sparking joy for me, even though I think mechanically it's definitely strong enough for the environment. And it is also mechanically the kind of thing that I like to do. Like just...
Correct fetch lands?
Well, I want life totals to be going down and the game to be proceeding to an end. And this does that for sure. So yeah, I don't know. Just doesn't spark joy for me. There's another card here with Offspring that I think is honestly not as good, but sparks a lot more joy. We'll get to that in a second. My fourth honorable mention is Mockingbird. X and a blue for a creature Bird Bard. It's a flying 1/1, and you may have it enter as a copy of any creature on the battlefield with mana value less than or equal to the amount of mana spent to cast Mockingbird, except it's a bird in addition to its other types and has flying. I think this is incredibly strong, actually. Really, really, really strong.
So it's based on you are allowed to just cast it for 1 and be a 1/1 flyer, correct?
Yeah, you just make a 1/1 flying Ragavan.
Seems good.
I'm sorry, it's a 2/1 flying Ragavan. It keeps the power and toughness of the copy.
Right, it doesn't care about X, it cares about the amount of mana spent, right?
Yeah, so you can just make a Ragavan or a Tarmogoyf or there's so many things
Flying
in this.
Deathrite Shaman.
There's so many things in this.
I'm just naming 1/1s over here.
There are just a lot of really, really good 1 and 2 drops in this cube that this will be really powerful, I think, a lot of the time. What I don't love about it is that it is kind of feast or famine, and that as a blue card, it doesn't really fit with what I want control decks to be doing. It's just kind of not a great fit for the kind of decks I want this cube to support. You can copy your own stuff in like a blue-red tempo deck or, a blue-green mid-range deck, which, again, it's, I think, really strong there. But I'm just not in love with it. I do like the art, though. The art's
I like
cool.
his sword.
Yeah, the art is very cool. Those are my honorable mentions. Here are cards I'm actually probably going to pick up a copy of, in ascending order of how excited I am about them. The first is Darkstar Augur. 2 and a black for a 2/3 creature bat warlock. It's got Offspring for a single black. It's got flying, and at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal a top card of your library, put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its mana value. So it is a flying Dark Confidant. That's a 2/3 instead of a 2/1 for 3 mana, and it has the potential to be 2 Dark Confidants, one of which is a 2/3, one of which is a 1/1. I don't think this is as good in this cube in terms of power level as Iridescent Vinelasher, but I think it is so much cooler, and I'm so much more drawn to it.
Like I said, you're going to have a lot of bats in your cube soon.
I love Dark Confidant so much. One of my favorite cards of all time, and there have been plenty of other Dark Confidant-esque cards that they've printed that are like callbacks to it or do a similar thing, and I don't think any of them have been viable here, but this one could potentially get there.
Are you concerned at all about having too much of this same effect? Because it's not necessarily great in multiples.
No, I'm not concerned about
great.
that. No, I mean, I think part of why I love Dark Confidant is because I see new players often make the mistake of being like, well, I'm not going to kill it because it might kill them. They're just going to like take so much damage. Or like they're at 12 already. Like I'm not going to kill the Dark Confidant because it'll probably just kill them over the course of a few turns and then just lose the game. I think it's correct.
Oh, that's the new player mistake with Dark Confidant, because I've made some other mistakes with Dark Confidant.
What have you done?
I don't know. At least put a Grave Titan in my deck, if not something bigger.
That would have been a long time ago, but it's possible, yeah. We had a Roto draft recently where a player played both Dark Confidant and Blightsteel Colossus in the same deck.
Respect.
Yeah, big respect. Never hit him.
Then they must have been right. They made a correct choice. The data proves it.
Anyway, Bat Bob is cool. I didn't rate this super highly on the survey. I don't actually think it's going to stick around forever, but I really want to try it, so I'm going to. The card I'm next most excited about is Emberheart Challenger. 1 and a red for a 2/2 creature mouse warrior with haste and prowess. We've seen a fair number of 2-mana 2/2s with haste, which I think is already a pretty good baseline. 2-mana 2/2 with haste and prowess is an even better baseline. It also has Valiant. Whenever it becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, exile the top card of your library until end of turn. Not the end of your next turn, until end of this turn, you may play that card. So impulsive draw whenever you equip an equipment to it, or target it with something, or whatever, on a card that already has a pretty darn good baseline.
Yeah, this card's really pushed. It does a lot.
Purely a matter of what I want my 2-drops to do, and this is in consideration, certainly. You're not going to like the next one, Anthony, but it is Kitsa Otterball Elite. This is the card that we talked at length about a few episodes ago when we were talking about cards that just kind of do everything. It is 1 and a blue for a 1/3 legendary creature otter wizard. It has vigilance and prowess and tap, draw a card, discard a card. So just that right there is just a so much better Merfolk Looter. It is not even funny. A 1/3 that can attack and also loot, and then prowess also makes it really hard to block because the threat of casting some spells means that you got to have something with 4 power or 5 power to block it and actually threaten to kill it. It also has 2 and tap to copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Activate only if Kitsa's power is 3 or greater. Now here's the thing. I don't like the design of this card. I think it is evidence of the kind of card design that I think is overall bad for the game, and for all the reasons we talked about in our previous episode. I do think it will lead to the kinds of game decisions that I do want to foster in this cube environment. So I'm going to be trying it out.
You ought to be ashamed.
You ought to be ashamed.
I know you saw that coming on my face.
I actually didn't.
Like
I saw something coming on your face. I didn't know what it was, but it was that. Yeah, I mean, that's just what it comes down to. I
just noticed this like hoop in the background. Is Otterball like a sport that the otters play?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Confirmed.
Huh.
I imagine it's like the sport from Final Fantasy X Titus would play. I can't remember what it's called. It was like an underwater handball sort of variant.
Upside down water polo.
Anyway, perhaps surprising some people, there is a blue card I'm more excited about than Kitsa. It's a card I'm second most excited about for the Bun Magic Cube from this set, and it is Stormchaser's Talent. 1 blue mana for a enchantment class. Enters the battlefield, make a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. So it's a 1 mana 1/1 with prowess that has the following upside. You can pay 3 and a blue to make this level 2, and when it becomes level 2, you return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Then you can pay 6 additional mana, 5 and a blue, to make it level 3, and that means whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/1 blue and red otter creature token with prowess. If I hadn't had a kind of middling to negative experience with Elusive Otter in my cube, I'd be even more excited about this. I do think the base rate of a 1-mana 1/1 with prowess has a lot of potential in the right deck. And the problem with Elusive Otter was that it was only good in that deck. If you were a control deck, you were never taking Elusive Otter. And if you were like a blue-green mid-range deck that could maybe take advantage of the adventure side, you also didn't really want a 1/1 with prowess. Stormchaser's talent, I'm hopeful, can be serviceable in the blue-red spells deck, the like Delver-style deck, because you just get to play a 1/1 with prowess, and not just a 1/1 with prowess, but a 1/1 with prowess that triggers other prowess abilities.
Right, I think that is very relevant.
So this is you play this on turn 2 after you played your Monastery Swiftspear on turn 1, and you get another creature, but also trigger prowess at the same time. I'm also kind of hopeful that this could potentially be a sort of grindier control win condition, maybe. Like, you're a control deck, you play this out early to just chump block something, maybe trade with an aggressive 2/1, then you level it up to get back a removal spell in the mid-game, then in the late game it becomes a token generator that just turns all of your counter spells and cantrips and stuff into creatures and lets you take over the game. I don't think it's very good at that. I don't think it's very good at the first thing either, but maybe it does both things passably enough to make the cut. I'm not sure.
As a Shark Typhoon caster, I'm just focused on that last step.
I did think about Shark Typhoon specifically when I looked at this card, because in this cube, Shark Typhoon is often making 1 and 2 size sharks because there are so many cheap spells. So the fact that this only makes a 1/1 is not that different, and the fact they have prowess means you can actually, in a Monastery Mentor kind of way, have a very explosive turn where you just kill your opponent out of nowhere.
Could be fun.
But I think I rated that a 5. So everything we talked about so far, like nothing rated higher than a 5 for me for the Bud Magic Cube. The next card's a 10 though, and that's Fell. 1 and a black for a sorcery, destroy target creature. Sick art, clean Doomblade. It's a sorcery instead of an instant, which is fine.
Hey, there is a... Oh, no, it's not a dove. Sorry, never mind.
This cube is a balance between being willing to play powerful, somewhat complicated cards in pursuit of the type of gameplay I adore. The example I've given of this in the past is like Ragavan. Ragavan is a really powerful card. It does a lot. It's really complicated, but it also rewards the type of decks and gameplay that I really enjoy, so that's where I use some of my complexity budget. And Kitsa is another place where I'm choosing to use some of my complexity budget, even though I don't love the design of that card in a vacuum. And it's cards like Fell that allow me to have that complexity budget to spend on other stuff. So is this the most powerful removal spell I've ever seen? No. Does it belong in my cube if I was just playing the top 15 most powerful removal spells ever printed with no accommodations for complexity? No, it doesn't belong there either. But it's absolutely going in because of how clean it is and because it just kills the thing, answers it outright. And that, I think, frees up more complexity to be used in other places on cards like Kitsa or Ragavan or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, tidy, clean design, good name, no notes.
Let's finish on the regular cube, Anthony.
All right, so I have, honestly, maybe only 3 cards that think are really good fits, but a couple of other things let's talk through. So we mentioned Valiant.
So you don't like Valiant, then, is what it comes down to.
You mentioned Valiant, and I love the mechanic. I don't know if I love any of the individual cards. So let's talk about Mousetrapper. This is 2 and a white for a 3/2 with Flash, Valiant, so whenever it's targeted by a spell or ability, for the first time each turn, tap target creature an opponent controls. I like this card, but it's also kind of feels pretty interchangeable with a lot of things, and I don't know if
What's it interchangeable with?
I don't know, some other 3-mana 3/2 with a little bit of upside.
I think it's a pretty substantial upside here. This, I think, is a big boost to aggro decks for sure. And 3/2 with Flash is already a very good base stat line.
Okay, perfect. Mousetrapper in. What do you think about Heartfire Hero? This is 1 red for a 1/1 with Valiant. It will get a +1/+1 counter whenever you target it, and also when it dies, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. I don't know if I'm excited about the play patterns here. I like targeting and giving it counters. That's cool. It honestly seems probably a little bit on the strong side for this environment. I maybe should have mentioned we're talking about the regular cube, which is...
Oh, yeah, you should have mentioned that.
Should have mentioned that.
I forgot that, too.
Kind of plays like a limited set, maybe more like a Modern Horizons type set that's a little bit more powered up, a little bit more synergistic than your typical limited set. I'm not sure I like the tension with Heartfire Hero of feeling like, oh, I'm getting beaten down by this giant mouse, and even if I kill it, I'm just going to die to it. Feels like not necessarily the most fun play pattern.
My concern is that it feels like it would just slot so nicely right into like the red-black deck, which is already maybe one of the better decks in the environment.
That's another good point, yeah.
Do we really need face damage here, like, to close things out by just the inevitability that is provided by, you have Dreadhorde Butcher in this cube, which is a similar thing.
Yep.
You have the 2-mana artifact that we both love that dies and does damage to something. What is it?
Perilous Mirror?
Perilous Mirror in here, which is a similar thing. Like, that play pattern of okay, well, this thing is just, I can't deal with this in any way.
Right.
Like, I can't, you attack me and it basically has unblockable because I can't kill it because then it just does damage to me anyway, but I also can't not block it.
I mean, you could even imagine a case where somebody's like, well, I cast Fist of Flames on this. It gets at least +2, plus another counter and trample, so now I'm taking 6, and then you sacrifice it to something and I take another 6. Yeah, okay. It seems like it could be a little bit too
that
explosive.
part I actually kind of like. The explosive part I'm fine with. What I hate is the, like, slog of being like, well, I can't, like, just can't deal with this, and if it grows even a little more, then I'm just like, damned if I do, damned if I don't.
Right.
That being, like, in that corner, I think, is a bummer, and I think it's fine to have a couple of those cards, but to have, I just thought of 3 off the top of my head. This would be the third one with Dreadhorde Butcher and Perilous Mirror, where it's like...
And you know they're going to have Blood Artist in play also. They just always have it.
It makes it, like, in my opinion, it kind of, like, really negates a lot of the stuff you care about in this cube, which is, like, attacking and blocking and, like, caring about combat and stuff. It's like, well, I can't care about combat because this thing is just negating all of my decisions.
All right, the mouse is out. Sazcap's Brew is 1 and a red for an instant. Gift a tapped fish. As an additional cost to cast a spell, discard a card. Target player draws 2 cards. If the gift was promised, target creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So this is kind of like a Thrill of Possibility with a combat trick stapled to it, pending the promise of a fish.
And cool art.
I just love Thrill of Possibility for being a really nice, simple card. I think this is just a little too much complexity for me, so I think I'm not going to try it, but I wanted to call it out just because...
It doesn't feel like a regular cube card for that reason exactly. Like, yes, will it be better than Thrill of Possibility some of the time? Sure, but all that extra words when Thrill is so simple and so evocatively named.
Right. All right, but how about another gift card? Peerless Recycling. This is 1 on green for an instant. Gift a card. Return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. If the gift was promised, instead return 2 target permanent cards from your graveyard to your hand. So this is exactly the kind of thing that I think is kind of cool on these gift cards where, you know, maybe you just really need 2 particular things to get you out of a tight spot, but then you're also giving your opponent more resources to potentially answer your answer. Seems like it could play well. The fact that it only gets permanents is fairly limiting, I think, in this context, so I'm still kind of on the fence about it, but I wanted to mention it because I do think that play pattern is kind of interesting.
It's one of the coolest, cleanest designs in this regard, where it asks you specifically, like, is your second best card out of your graveyard better than the average card from your opponent's deck? And I think in a late game, the answer is going to be almost always yes. Like, you're going to have choices of cards in your graveyard, and your opponent's going to draw something at random, which already has a 40% chance of being a land or whatever. I think it's quite good.
All right, maybe we'll give that a try.
I'd play it. Instant speed, too.
That's true. That is pretty relevant. Last thing that is...
I might play that in the Turbo Cube.
Oh.
You get a random card, I get 2 eggs back? Yeah, sign me up.
That's a good point.
Just saying.
Last card that I think this is off the fence. But Patchwork Banner, this is 3 mana for a Manalith, so it taps for mana of any color. When it enters the battlefield, you also choose a creature type, and creatures of the chosen type you control get +1/+1. So this is kind of a side grade from Heraldic Banner, which only makes mana of a color of your choice that you choose when it enters. That one pumps all creatures of a particular color, though, which I think is just going to be more broadly applicable. So it was something I was thinking of, maybe a sideways shift, but I don't think there's enough density of any individual creature types that this is actually going to play better. All right, so a couple cards that I'm actually, I think, excited about. Bravekin Duo. This is our classic
those are all
rabbit
like
mouse.
Big maybes, and now you have ones
Big
you're
maybes.
actually excited about?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Bravekin Duo, 1 white mana for a 1/1 rabbit mouse. It has 1 and tap. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn, activated only as a sorcery. This cube is all about combat math and figuring out how to kill your opponent with your creatures, and a fair number of things care about power as well. You know, things like Dreadhorde Arcanist, which is, you know, in a lot of environments just casting a bunch of 1-drops. Here, you might actually just want to pump it and cast a 2-drop from your graveyard. So I don't think this is, you know, the biggest, splashiest card that's going to get everybody excited, but I think it's going to play pretty well.
Is this the first time I've seen a card costed like this, like on a 1-drop?
I think so, yeah.
Trying to think of similar examples. I can think of a lot at 2 mana from my like days of designing, you know, battle boxes with similar themes to your cube, but I can't think of one at 1 mana, so cool.
All right, next up, a little side grade, Eddymurk Crab. This is 5 blue for a 5/5 elemental crab. It has flash, and it costs 1 less to cast for each instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. Eddymurk Crab enters the battlefield tapped if it's not your turn, and when it enters the battlefield, tap up to 2 target creatures. I've had Tolarian Terror in the cube for a while, and honestly, I don't love it. It's just like, super, super efficient when it is efficient, and the ward just makes it kind of frustrating to play against sometime. So this being a little bit of a side grade where you still get a 5/5, but it's going to cost at least blue, and also having slightly more dynamic play patterns of being able to tap down some attackers, or you can't flash in and block it, which honestly I think I'm happier with it that way. I think this is just going to be a much more interesting card in that kind of slot for a Spells Matter deck.
A little surprised by that one, because it feels to me like Tolarian Terror is like the clean, regular version of that card, and this has got like...
You're not... If we could take off one paragraph, that would be great.
4 separate lines of rules here.
Okay, you're talking me down.
No, I'm not saying... I mean, I'll play it.
Also, it says Elemental Crab, but it looks kind of like a lobster to me. I can't really get a good sense.
No, it looks like a spider crab.
Okay, yeah.
That's pure spider crab energy.
All right, the last thing, again, is sort of just a little side grade. This is Tempest Angler. This is 1... blue-red hybrid, so 3 in total, 2 of which must be some combination of blue and red. It's a 2/2 Otter Wizard. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a 1/1 counter on Tempest Angler. I've had Spellgorger Weird in the cube for a long time, and it's medium. I think having it be a hybrid mana is maybe slightly better, and frankly, I don't love the illustration on Spellgorger Weird. Do I love this Otter? It's also medium. And that's what I've got for the regular cube.
That's a fair few things. That's more than most sets I tend to have for the regular cube, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and I feel like I say this every time, but there are just a ton of cards that are, the good commons, decent uncommons that would just slot in and you wouldn't bat an eye at them in this environment, so I have the luxury of being picky.
Are you off Offspring as a matter of course because of the extra token?
Not totally. If there was a card that I just thought was a great fit, I would be willing to, but I would say it's a slight negative just for being a little bit of a complicated mechanic.
Because I really like Flowerfoot Swordmaster.
That also has a typal thing going on, which...
Well, I mean, kind of, but it makes 2 of the thing of that type.
That's the thing of how it works with itself.
Yeah, this is 1 white mana for a creature mouse soldier. It's a 1/2 with Offspring 2, and it has Valiant. Whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability you control for the first time each turn, mice you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. Obviously, if you Offspring it, then the other thing is also a mouse, so it pumps both the tokens.
Okay, let's check out how cute this token is.
It's got a cool flower on the art.
Okay, well, the token is very good. All right, so maybe minus points for Offspring, but plus points for Offspring.
I like... I feel like you're very selective with your 1-drops in this cube, and oftentimes we'll choose 1-drops that you maybe explicitly don't want to play on turn 1, and this kind of feels like it fits that theme a little bit too, where there are some hands where I'll play this on turn 1 and be perfectly happy with it, but a lot of hands where this is really more of a 3-drop, and it seems like a cool payoff for the kinds of things you care about. Just a suggestion.
I'll think about it.
Just a suggestion. And,
it's in my
honestly,
list now.
The art did really jump out at me, both of the card and the token, so...
I think I even used it as a background for one of the surveys.
There you go. All right, we ran long. Oh, but that's it for our first episode.
Ending with a great energy here.
That's it for the first episode of our Bloomburrow set review. The community set review will be some point in the future after we gather responses from the survey. So make sure you fill that out at luckypaper.co/survey/BLB. You can also just go to luckypaper.co. It'll be a banner on the top of the page that will let you fill out that survey. Oh, I do want to mention that I have fulfilled all of the orders for the playmats and then gotten a few that were lost in the mail or damaged, and I fulfilled those replacements as well. And I still have a little stack of playmats left over from the extras I ordered just to make sure I could solve any fulfillment problems that arose. So if you missed your opportunity to buy a Cube Will Outlive Magic playmat and you'd like to do that, shoot me an email, mail@luckypaper.co. I'm not making them for sale on the website because I have no way to do stock management, so I can't have it stop selling them when I'm out of them, so I don't want to oversell and then have to refund people. That's a nightmare. But if you want to order one, just shoot me an email, and we'll sort it out over email, and I'll get one out to you. Mail@luckypaper.co.
Apologies to Junk Zero for having given you the curse of having tasted delicious soy sauce.
Oh, I mean, it's really life-changing. And on that bombshell, that's the end of this episode of Lucky Paper Radio. All of our music is produced by DJ James Nasty. All the magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast. This podcast is produced by thinking really hard about magic cards and then speaking to microphones about it. If we got any of the rules text wrong, that was intentional as a bait for engagement. Anthony, thank you for the gift of friendship and for the gift of Cube.
Thank you for the gift of friendship and the gift of Cube. And, other stuff? I don't know.
Weird.